few days later, this is verse 13, a few days later, this younger son packed up all his belongings and moved to a distant land where he, what's the word? Wasted. You can talk out loud in church. It's okay. I'm going to say it one more time. He moved to a distant land, and there where he, what's the word? Wasted all his money and wild living. We find out a little bit more about the wild living later. It says, as the time came, his money ran out, and a great famine swept over the land, and he began to starve. He persuaded a local farmer to hire him, and the man sent him into the fields to feed the pigs. Again, culturally, as Jesus taught this, all the men, all the people listening to this would have been a very significant, disgust reflex. Does that make sense? They would have been disgusted as the story went on. Think of the most disgusting thing you think of right now, right? That's the feeling they would have had in this moment of the story. Disgust. And it goes on to say, the young man became so hungry that even the pods he was feeding the pigs looked good to him. But, read this last sentence with me, no one gave him anything. Now, I got to stop here and mention something, because it's another point of tension, and it ties to forgiveness, but just, I want you to see how it pieces together. I want you to see here that I don't ever want you to underestimate the power, right, the tension, the power and the tension of a freedom fail. Never underestimate the power that comes from the tension of a freedom fail. Okay? A freedom fail moment, if you haven't had one, you're not old enough, right? Or you're lying. That's just the way it works, right? A freedom fail is when you decide, regardless of wisdom, regardless of what your parents said, regardless of what your friends said, regardless of what your spouse said, regardless of what wisdom told you, you decided to take your own path, your own route. If I could just get away from these rules, if I could just get away from this person, if I could just get out of this system, I'm going to be happy. And you know what? For a moment, it's usually pretty awesome because that's just the way it works. You do find some happiness, but there's always a fail at the end. There's always something, the bottom drops out. There's always something that's completely unfulfilled. And a freedom fail is a moment that God uses. So don't underestimate. This is hard. I'm just telling you this is very difficult. It's very difficult when I have conversations with folks whose spouse has walked away, and to a certain degree, they're struggling to forgive, and knowing that forgiveness that starts there has to let them go. Paul would address it, right? Paul addresses it in the church in Corinth. He writes about this guy in the church, and this guy in the church is doing some pretty nasty stuff with I can't even get into it. He's doing some nasty, he's doing stuff that even the pagans go, gross, right? So it's not just the church. It wasn't just a religious thing. Even the pagans, even the heathens think it's gross. And he goes on to say, look, just turn him over. Just let him go. You know what I'm saying? Don't try to figure out how to make him part of your life group. Just let him go, right? Just let him go and live that freedom fail. You don't know what God's going to do. But I can tell you what, it's really hard for parents. I haven't personally experienced this fully yet, but I watched it with my mom and dad, with my brother. It's very hard to watch your kids reject and rebel and reject and rebel, and watch them go experience pain and see the bottom drop out. But you don't know what God's going to do in that moment. Again, what's faith? Trust God with all of that. So don't underestimate what happens in a freedom fail. This is what happens to this guy. His father lets him go. That's where forgiveness starts. But he has a freedom fail moment. And then